Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Obviously, people who have this condition of gender confusion have much higher rates of anxiety, of depression, and suicide.
What is gender dysphoria? Is it a mental disorder?
Please welcome Desmond Napolis, a.k.a. Desmond is amazing.
Lactatia is the devious diva you could ever think of.
Transgender issues are finally making it mainstream.
So naturally, we're going to science this up.
And there is no scientific evidence that any of that decreases after the surgery.
And this is what I want to do.
Nobody can change genders.
And as a number of people who still practice the surgery have recently testified, there have been increasing rates of regret and trying to undo the surgery.
I was born a male. I started living as a female when I was 19 years old, had a sex change when I was 30 years old. I've now been living as a woman for 28 years, and I fully regret this.
So like everything's great and I'm happy. I'm not happy. If I had one wish, I would never have taken that first testosterone shot.
Are we truly, biologically, the sex we identify as? Let's talk about that now.
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
Light exposing darkness.
So we are going to be talking about gender Babylon. Babylon just means confusion in the Bible, right? So there's a lot of gender confusion out here. And I don't care how much you think you know about this. This is confusing to anyone. I don't want to be disrespectful. I know that this is a sensitive topic, but this is confusion. And you'll find out. We're going to talk realistically about some of the complications, pros and cons with this. What are you guys thinking right now when you see this?
Yeah. I wonder if are they in pain? Cause he's wearing what's that called?
Like
that black thing, like a corset, but that's not the natural frame of a man, so.
That's true. I was gonna say a lot of women will do a lot to look good, heels and all this, it's painful. But you're right, his frame isn't even made for this. So I wanna go ahead and say, many years ago, I used to dress a little like this. I would never say that I was transgender. I never felt like a woman trapped in a man's body, but I did have the mindset clothing is clothing. Who's gonna tell me that cotton sewn in this shape is just for women, So here I am with pantyhose all over. I'm actually wearing a skirt in this picture. So, I get it. I've been down that road. I'm not just, somebody who no idea what is going on right now. But I do see that we see Hollywood has a big influence in this. Jaden Smith, he's pushing the limits with this trans clothing, which I probably would have really been into this. We'll watch a little clip here.
Laverne Cox, definitely my favorite right now. She's amazing. I love her. I think she should be, if there's gonna be a trans spokesperson, I think it should be Laverne Cox, definitely.
I think Miley Cyrus is a very big inspiration with me, especially when it comes to gender. She is just fighting hard for the trans community. She is so open and accepting with that, and she's a very big voice, and I appreciate her for that.
I love Jaden Smith. Yeah, Jaden Smith is doing a really good job of breaking the clothing gender norm. I think it's really important for celebrities and people who have a wider platform to utilize that to make people more aware of what's out there.
If you know at least somebody else is out there, even if you're not connected with them. Say you're just cognizant of Ruby Rose just existing in the world, being their beautiful self. It's just really nice to know that somebody's out there that could possibly help you.
So I kind of identify with Jaden, I don't think he's gay, he probably doesn't feel like a woman, but he's just I'm just expressing myself through fashion. I don't believe there's a guy or girl clothing. I'm just if I like it, I'm gonna wear it.
You actually see that a lot in the hip-hop culture. You see a lot of hip-hop guys starting to come out with dresses and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Wiz Khalifa and all those guys. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of mindset that I can kind of identify with. I can't connect with feeling like I'm a man or a woman trapped in a man's body or vice versa. So we do see Hollywood really pushing for this mindset. You see a lot of Hollywood mothers raising their children gender neutral, or even boys wearing dresses and stuff. So I do believe there's some kind of push that Hollywood is putting this out there, because this was not even an issue 10 years ago. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. You know, the Bible talks about homosexuality. The Bible talks about wearing the opposite clothing for your sex. So it's not new, but at the same time, we're seeing like this coming out for this, and I think there's a push from Hollywood.
Consider the following.
I'm a girl. Could have just as easily been a boy though, because the probability of becoming a girl is always 1 in 2. See, inside each of our cells are these things called chromosomes, and they control whether we become a boy or a girl. Your mom has 2 X chromosomes in all of her cells, and your dad has 1 X and 1 Y chromosome in each of his cells. Before you're born, your mom gives you one of her chromosomes and your dad gives you one of his. Mom always gives you an X. And if dad gives you an X too, then you become a girl. But if he gives you his Y, then you become a boy. See, there are only 2 possibilities. XX, a girl, or XY, a boy. The chance of becoming either a boy or a girl is always 1 in 2. A 50-50 chance either way. It's like flipping a coin. X, you're a girl, Y, you're a boy. Some people are just lucky, I guess.
So this is an old Bill Nye?
Yeah, the 90s.
I was just gonna ask, in the 90s? Because if it was released this year, it would probably be completely different radio.
Very, very interesting, because this is actually on Netflix, some of the old ones, and this scene was cut out. This one little segment of this episode was just missing.
So how did you find this scene?
Because somebody must have had a VHS or something, but I think when they first put it on Netflix, it was on there, and then I saw a video where somebody was showing, look, it's missing now. So
yeah, because offended by science? Like what?
Yeah, but he clearly has a different stance now.
Yeah, we'll take a look at what Bill Nye says now. So this says there's 2 genders, and it's like flipping a coin. You're either gonna be male or you're either gonna be female.
I like how they also only say there's only 2. There's only 2.
Mom and dad.
Right.
You hear something different now, like there's like 63 genders now.
One thing's clear about sexuality. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. Female or male, gay or straight, pink or blue. We were taught to see these as binary. Now we're realizing it's more like a kaleidoscope. And this stuff isn't just for adults. Parents know this already. Kids explore gender, expression, attraction before they've ever heard of a spectrum. Take sex. We used to think it was pretty straightforward. X and a Y chromosome for males, 2 X's for females. But we see more combinations than that in real life. And even for people with just 2 sex chromosomes, hormones can vary wildly. So can anatomy. What makes someone male or female isn't so clear-cut.
So what he's saying is we used to believe that there was only 2. We used to believe it was clear-cut, but now we're seeing, and it's not just in adults, but it's also in kids. Why is it something that we're now seeing? What was going on 100 years ago?
It's interesting, the visual that they're showing you too is now you can have 3 X's and a Y. I mean, is that even like scientifically possible? Isn't it only 2?
I don't know. I think that's probably what he's alluding to. I don't remember anything like that when I took genetics, but I could have missed that along the way, or maybe they just weren't talking about it. Now, yeah. Because it's been a while since I went to the school, but.
Well, the science hasn't changed. This is true that, you know, there's 2 genders. You're either male or female, and it depends on whether you have 2 X's or an X and a Y. That is true. But he's trying to throw this like pseudoscience in here and make it look confusing, basically. But we know that this is a mental issue. This is not physical. You can't look under a microscope and tell you are trans. It is mental. So that might be something that somebody would be offended by if you say, you know, you have a mental issue But there's a lot of mental issues, you know, people, especially if you've had some traumatic event happen in your life, you grew up without a father, you were abused, sexually abused, that stuff messes with you, and there's help for that situation, and you know, you can recover. But we are being told now that it is wrong to help people recover. That if a kid, 5 years old, a boy says, I feel like a girl, it is wrong to say, well, no, you're really a boy. You actually have to embrace that idea and continue forward with it. So what do you think about this?
Wow. I mean, obviously not possible, right?
Well, look again. It's possible if you're a woman.
Oh.
Dressed up as a man.
That's true. Is that a woman?
So this is a biological born woman, but she's been taking testosterone to get the facial hair and the muscles and all this.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, genetically, it's the only way that can work.
Yeah.
I mean, there just is no other way. I think it seems like what's being preyed upon, and we should be sensitive to the fact that there are people who are born with multiple or varying genitalia, you know, and for that person, maybe that could be confusing, you know. What, you know, I obviously have both parts. What am I, you know? And but you're taking, I'm going somewhere with that. You're taking something that's out of the norm, you know, and trying to apply that to mainstream, whereas most people, you know, they're born the way they are. And when you open that up for interpretation, I mean, it really opens up a much bigger question, because if you feel like you are something, well, what if I feel like I'm, you know, whatever? What if I feel like I'm a dolphin? Or what if I feel like I'm rich? Or what if I feel like I'm, you know, the king of the world? I mean, where do you draw the line, I guess?
I think if you're biologically one way, but you feel like another way, I still don't think that biologically changes your biology.
No, I'm not saying it does.
So you know, just even in the topic of like skin color, if I felt like I was not the skin color that I am, would that change anything? No, people would probably look at you and be like, no, you're crazy, because I can see that. But in this one area, I think that it's really gotten
That's
confusing.
actually much more controversial. I've seen, I wish I would have had the article, but there is a woman who felt like she was black and she would dye her skin and her hair and everything, and it was a huge controversial topic. So why is that so much more controversial? That's the thing, where do you draw the line? You know, you can say, I feel like a man or a woman, or even an animal or an infant, but you can't feel like you're a different race. I mean, like, who's the one that says, no, you can't do it this way, you have to do it this way, you know? So the definition of gender is, medical definition is sex. That's the first one. The number two is the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one sex.
So, but by that definition though, if you're psychologically have traits of being one gender, even though you're born with a particular gender, I mean, I guess what I would like to see is this a long-standing definition, or is this a new definition?
Yeah.
Because if you look in a dictionary 100 years ago, maybe even 50 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, it probably, I'm guessing, says something a little different. Because I look at that and I say, well, you know, if you behave a certain way, are you a certain gender? If you culturally are a certain way, you're a certain gender. If you psychologically have more traits in common with one gender over another, then you're associated with that gender. To me, I see that definition as fitting what we actually see today.
Yeah, when I was first introduced to this topic as a little girl, it was told to me that there is a difference. There's a separation between sex and gender, two different things. So your sex is your biology, whereas your gender is more of what you identify with.
How'd you learn that?
Just in conversation, and also in like things like YouTube and media and things like that, and just being curious about it and hearing someone's perspective. It was just common for there just to be a separation between gender and sex.
Yeah, that's what you hear a lot. And people like the one thing they always say is there's a difference between sex and gender, but then there's a lot of times not even a definition given. They just say there's a difference, and you're kind of like, well, what is it?
I guess another thing, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but as you think about it, there are people that are not identifying with either gender anymore. So how does that change the definition of gender? Because there is no one or the other. It's more fluid, I guess. It's more open to interpretation. You know, you say, I'm not male or female. I think it's called binary.
Yeah.
So that'd be interesting to see how this definition changes.
Yeah, I wonder how a
over time.
non-binary person, if you would interact with them, would you see they had more feminine or masculine traits, or do they really just blend that well? Now there are 63 genders currently. This list was too big to get in a screenshot. It goes all the way down to here. And there's all these different attributes. So we got masculine, homosexual man.
Well, wait, Mikey, do you know what you are? Do you know like what you
I
would
am
be called?
a masculine, heterosexual man, yes.
In terms of gender, I mean. Is it
yeah.
gender or sex? Now, see,
Well, this
confusion.
is confusing.
What I mean
That
by, because they would call you a cisgendered man, meaning you are biologically a man and you own your masculinity. So you're cis. So I'm a cisgender.
Cis meaning the same. It's like
right,
a Latin word.
A woman or female. So no longer am I just a woman or you're just a man. It's this very specific cisgender. And then you have, you know, trans, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, and do you think that, honestly, this is finished? I mean, are we done? I think the more time goes on, there's going to be alien and everything else, you know, because we're seeing that. And I really wish I could see all of them, because I can't even wrap my head around this.
Yeah, what happens when you start adding like technology into this situation? If they're, you know, blending, I don't know, machine and man together as they're kind of trying to, what happens to this list? I mean, are you an Apple masculine man or a PC? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's
cyborg.
I was looking at some statistics recently, and they were polling people to see their stance on relationship with robots. You know, I'm like, that's kind of an odd thing to poll people on, you know, unless there's some intentionality there. Like, why would you even poll people that, you know?
Yeah. I think where things are headed is way darker than what we see on the surface. I think it's small steps that are leading us there. Satan wants to have a world of confusion. He loves this. And I mean, in the Bible it talks about that they were creating new ways to sin, and we just can't even imagine what the days of Noah were like, but I think we're quickly approaching that. So clearly there's a physical difference in the male and the female. What physical differences do you see?
Well, the man has a lot more muscles, or is more muscular.
At least in most cases.
Yeah.
His muscles are bigger.
Yeah.
In this picture, taller in stature.
Yeah, shoulders are broader typically.
Even
So
bone
hip structure is
density.
usually different.
So which one's stronger?
The male.
We can assume it's the
man.
Yeah.
The man is stronger.
I mean, I think God made male and female for this like perfect unity. You got the nurturing woman who can produce milk for her children, who can give birth to a child, and is there, you know, is the one that nurtures. Oh, you hurt yourself. But the man, he's got to go out there and do the work, build the house, carry the lumber, plow the field. And the two of them together, it's perfect unity. You can create life, you can sustain life, but what happens when you start mixing? You double this. You're going to be lacking something.
If that was the only choice, life would cease to exist beyond that.
That's true.
I mean, you have to have one of the both to continue life.
Yeah, I guess biologically, I mean, there are ways to conceive, you know, outside of a sexual union.
Yes.
However, I would add to that, if that is your preference and that's what you believe, then I don't see any way that you could actually be like an evolutionist.
Very true. Yeah. Unless you believe that, you know, eventually nature finds a way, as said in Jurassic Park. But, you know, if one-celled organism split, it somehow did it. So if we're to believe in evolution, then maybe if we keep going down this road and we're separating the genders and the sexes, maybe we'll become asexual somehow. But where evolution fails is dead life cannot reproduce. I mean, we're all going to die before we evolve into some kind of asexual being, I believe. We're kind of like leaving the postmodern mindset into the post-truth mindset. Let's just look at postmodernism for a second. So what is postmodernism? Postmodernism is the idea that reality is not mirrored in human understanding, but rather constructed as individuals find their own reality. What's true for you isn't necessarily true for me. It takes a micro rather than a macro approach in looking at the way individuals identify themselves, compared to the structuralism view in which an entire society is looked at. Postmodernists believe that realities are subject to change and that apparent realities are actually social constructs which limit individuals. So we see problems with this. I mean, it's if there's no set rule, then who's to say pedophilia is wrong or murder is wrong? What's true for you is not true for me. Hitler was, he had a good idea in his mind. He wanted to evolve humanity into perfect beings. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, the best race, and he looked at other races and he said, they're not human, exterminate them. He was trying to evolve humanity. In his mind, he was doing something good. But I don't believe that that is a good thing. I believe in set laws. Biblically, God gave us a set law that we should follow, and I believe those laws. So we're in this post-truth era, relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. Now we can understand how, we have to conform to this. Oh, you feel like you are not the gender you were born as. I have to cater to that. I have to call a boy a girl. I have to, we have to cater to this because your emotion trumps physical reality and truth. And what's ironic is that I meet so many atheists who say, I'm an atheist because I believe in science. I don't believe in your fairy tale. I believe in, physical proof. I believe in science. Yet they're probably in the post-truth mindset where they agree with, well, if you feel like a dog, then you can be a dog. That totally does not coexist with, I believe in science.
If this was true, and I feel like the world around me is viewed through the Christian mindset, there is a male and a female, and that's how I feel, does that make it truthful? Based on this, you know what I mean? So how could you refute me, because that's how I feel, if I'm saying that my emotional belief system tells me the world is like this?
I guess I would even ask the question that Pilate asked, and that is, what is truth? I mean, the way this is constructed, you're deconstructing the word truth even. Truth now becomes opinion, because in order for truth to be truth, it's something that's set up as absolute that everybody agrees upon. You can't call it truth anymore because everybody's going against it. You have to call it now opinion. And so what we're talking about is like moral absolutes. And where does morality come from, Unless morality transcends you and I, then whatever you want goes. And so that's kind of the foundation to all of this.
So you brought up an interesting point, because I was thinking, how come Christians are persecuted in such ways like, well, you're not allowed to have that viewpoint because you're not allowed to teach that homosexuality is wrong. You're not allowed to tell people they're wrong. Why? You have a feeling that is right. So how can they tell you that that's wrong? But at the same time, if you go with that, then you have to say, well, then I must accept that this man is a dog. This is where it gets really confusing, because it's like you want to justify one way, but then in order to do that, you have to take this other way too. Or do you? So that's like where the discussion should really go, because it's like, that's why it's called Gender Babylon. It's just pure confusion. And how do we coexist with these two ideas?
But there are people whose sex and gender are not the same. As a first hypothesis, scientists thought there might be a male brain, shown here, and a female brain. Voila. So perhaps a person could have a male brain in a female body and a female brain in a male body, or the other way around. But there are people who identify as both genders, or neither gender, or a combination of the two. And it turns out you can't identify the gender of a brain just by looking at it. Gender is like sex. It's on a spectrum.
So following along this line of thinking, if this is a mental issue, we look at people who are depressed and they want to kill themselves, and we don't say, well, if that's how you feel, just go for it. You know, we want to help them. When you find people who are anorexic and you can tell, you look healthy, you do not look skinny, yet they keep starving themselves and they look like a skeleton. What if that person went to a liposuction clinic and said, Doc, I need liposuction, and they look like a skeleton? Would it be right for that doctor to perform a surgery on this person because of their mental view of who they are? This is where we can see a parallel, because people are saying, well, I might look like a man, but I feel like a woman, so doctor, give me the right stuff. Is that really a good thing to do? Wow. People say that there's a lot of suicide in the trans world because they can't transform to who they want. But I have actually heard cases where people go through the whole transformation, have a different mindset later in life, and they're even more depressed and commit suicide afterwards. Because what have I done to myself? I've mutilated my body.
10, 9, 8.
So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh.
7, 6, 5, 4.
I was born a male. I started living as a female when I was 19 years old, had a sex change when I was 30 years old. I've now been living as a woman for 28 years, and I fully regret this.
Nobody can change genders. It's impossible. It's delusional. It's a mental illness.
Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man.
Once I finally had the surgery, I went, oh, this was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do to cut off my male anatomy.
The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh."
The fact of the matter is that 40% of people who are attempting suicide are people who regret ever changing genders.
Lift off, Falcon 9. Vehicles clear for time.
Growing up, I had a totally different mindset. You saw the picture. I thought that was going to be me for life. I was like, this is me. There's no gender in clothing. I wear makeup, and this is me. It's not me anymore. That was a different mindset. Yet now they're telling you that parents cannot tell a 13-year-old, they cannot tell them that you're not trans. It's called child abuse. If a parent interferes with what that kid feels like. When I was 13, I wanted to get horn implants. I wanted to get my teeth sharpened. I wanted all kinds of tattoos that I would never get now.
It really goes to a broader question. If you can't tell the child certain things because it's child abuse, where do you draw that line? We don't tell kids to go into the street because, eventually one day a car might be coming along and it could hit them and hurt them. And I realize that's, an extreme example, but where do you draw the line on, telling them, for example, what to eat? Well, I'm sorry, you shouldn't eat Cocoa Puffs for breakfast because it's not really good for you, not good for your health, not good for your teeth. But in telling them no and denying them, are we playing into that same mindset? Is it child abuse?
That's very good
I wouldn't
example.
agree.
Yeah, because that kid is saying, I feel like eating cake.
Yeah, I feel like this is oatmeal today.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I feel like loving parents are they have the best interest for their child. And some parents might even feel like, when you reach 18, you can make that decision and I'll support you. But right now, think about this. You're young, things are gonna change. I don't think that's child abuse.
No, the Bible says that we should train our children, train up a child in the way that they should go. And so if we are to train them and then society or the government or whoever says, no, you shouldn't train them, that's child abuse, well, ultimately who do we serve, God or man, is the bigger question.
Amen. So how do you feel about this scenario? The bathroom bill says that, now transgender men can go into the women's room, and you might look at it and be like, man, I'm kind of worried about my daughter or my wife. Like, what if this man followed in behind your wife or your daughter? Would that concern you? Or do you think, well, since he looks like a woman, you should use the women's room?
I still think an easy fix for this is they don't want a separate bathroom for transgendered individuals because they feel that that's coming all the way back around full circle to segregation and whatnot, right? But myself as a straight heterosexual male, and I want to use a bathroom with other males than the other sex, give me a special bathroom. I'll use that special bathroom.
That is such a bathroom.
You know what I mean?
I say we just go to porta potties everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a transgender bathroom.
If you want to segregate, I will raise my hand. You can segregate me, and I will go in my own bathroom.
I love it. Hey, amen. So I think usually the consensus is like people say, I don't want a man going into the women's room. I feel unsafe. How do you feel, Kendi, if this came in right behind you in the bathroom?
Okay, sorry.
I don't know what to call. I'm just going to be honest. It's confusing to me. I don't want to say the wrong pronoun, so we're supposed to say this, that, they.
Right. I think I would feel uncomfortable, but I'm just the type of person that also takes the other person's feelings into consideration, and it's just me talking, from my perspective. So, I would just look at the situation. If there are stalls, if the person is like respectful and all that kind of stuff, then fine. But I know that's not the case for everyone.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that answered your question. Like,
So
I'm still taken aback. I don't know.
Basically, you just would clam up and just say, just do what you gotta do.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, basically you're saying you're probably not gonna confront the situation.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of people like that. A lot of people probably feel uncomfortable, but they're not confrontational. I'm like that.
Hear me out in this. There just seems to be this, people are making this correlation between wanting segregation with transgender versus male and female, and segregation between races. And I find that very interesting. I think segregation in certain situations are necessary, and in other cases they are despicable. So you have, again, segregation with races, definitely no, because we're all people. But then you have segregation between man and woman, which is a necessity. It's something that is needed, it's not wrong. And when you're talking about segregation between people who are biologically man, biologically woman, and then you have this other, would it be wrong to segregate those people? I don't see why that would be, because in a sense, no matter how you try, you cannot relate. If a man wants to become a woman, let's just say, okay, fine, we accept you, you are who you are, but still you cannot relate to a biological woman, a woman who has natural things that go on in her body that you will never experience, a woman who goes through society with just things that they will never experience, and vice versa. I have no idea what it's like or what's going through a mind of a biological woman who identifies as a man. And I don't expect to ever relate to that. So why wouldn't they want that segregation or that safe space for themselves? And why am I not validated in saying that I want a safe space for women who go through what I can relate to? And if I talk about something, it's not something that's unrelated to the next person.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I do.
And I think when they start making these comparisons with race segregation, it's just a way to emotionally manipulate the person into getting their way. Yeah.
It's wrong. One has nothing to do with the other.
Exactly. So here's where it gets confusing, and this is where all of this is confusing, because I actually have sympathy for the people, the lawmakers who are having to deal with this, because this is the other scenario.
So if this bathroom policy is already in place in so many areas in the United States, then why are people so terrified?
I know.
This is Chase Tranchio. He's a lawyer at the ACLU, and he's transgender.
You do?
Yeah, I know why.
Why? Tell me why.
Well, I think people are really anxious about the fact that we have to share public space with people who are different from ourselves in general. And right now, there's all this attention on transgender people. So people are focusing all of the fear and confusion about who trans people are around their anxiety about the bathrooms in general and trying to expel transgender people from public space. We've seen it over and over again throughout history. The reality is that bathrooms have long been a battleground, and we saw this in the context of the civil rights movement and efforts to expel Black people from spaces that white people dominated, including bathrooms and locker rooms.
Wait, what are you doing in the women's bathroom?
If I was in North Carolina, I would have to use the women's bathroom because I was assigned female at birth. So I would be a dude in the women's bathroom. That's what the law requires.
Are you saying that these lawmakers are literally causing the problem that they say that they want to avoid in the first place?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But can you give me a minute?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, so you see how confusing it can be. How can they even make a set law? Because if they say, well, you have to use the bathroom of whatever you were assigned at birth. Well, now you got what looks like a man in the women's room. But if you do the other way around, now you got, well, a guy in a dress in the women's room. So, I mean.
I totally agree with you in not wanting to be a lawmaker or anything like that. But it's like, what do you accommodate and what do you not? If you look at people with disabilities, bathrooms accommodate them. Not talking about different sexes and things like that, just looking at the problem, which is the disability, versus someone who's a schizophrenic. They have certain things that they need to do when they're accommodated in certain situations and definitely not accommodating others, like they actually are put away and all these different things. When you're looking at gender dysphoria as a mental illness, you know, where's the line in accommodation? Because they're talking about public spaces. Well, you know, is a bathroom a public space or is it more of a private space amongst the same gender? Because we wouldn't kick a transgender out of a library or whatever, like a supermarket, but then you would in a bathroom. Like, I don't know, it's just really difficult. Where do you draw the line in accommodation versus not accommodating?
I have a solution. Give a special bathroom to these people who want to be especially using their own bathroom. I have no problem with that. I don't even know why this is really a massive discussion.
Well, I don't think they even want that's the whole point. They don't want a special bathroom. They want to go to the bathroom they want to go.
They want
with.
equality.
I get that. I want the special bathroom.
And
give me an extra
I guess
bathroom.
You know, for me, the way I look at it in a very practical way, you know, I think the people that are probably, my guess, most concerned about this are going to be either people with small children or women who feel like they're vulnerable. Guys generally aren't going to have as much of a problem just guessing because, you know, they feel like, hey, I can take care of myself. If there any kind of situation were to arise, generally, you know, I can navigate the situation. So I'm thankful that there are like family bathrooms. I have small children and, you know, it's very accommodating and useful because as a parent, sometimes you need some extra space, you know, than they give you in a normal bathroom. And sometimes you have a diaper bag and multiple children and, you know, it's hard to keep track of kids in like one stall and things like that. So I think that's accommodating. I think that's nice. And I think we should continue to have those kind of bathrooms. And if it's really a problem, you know, if you want your own bathroom, you can go in the family restroom, you know? I mean.
Yeah, but I think that solves everything. Actually, having a family, and I've been in lots of bathrooms like that, which is great. It's usually a single stall bathroom and it solves whatever issue. So, you know, if there's a concern, you have an ability to go all by yourself.
Yeah,
exactly.
I feel like the only fix that's going to be a real fix is to just make all bathrooms just open to whoever. There's a trough and just go use it. I mean, I really just feel like bathrooms are just going to have to say bathroom.
Yeah, I think the only real solution is just, you know, single stall bathrooms because there are many situations you'll go into a bathroom and even though it's a public space, you're still requiring privacy.
Yeah.
You know, so really the only way to ensure privacy is, you know, you have a single stall, it has a door, you can lock it. Anybody can go into it, but it's only one person at a time.
Here's something that's always baffled my mind. How come bathroom stalls are like gapped from here. There's just like all this open area. They should just have like really like a phone booth, and nobody would even have to worry because you wouldn't see anybody. I've always
they do that.
I've always felt vulnerable. There's like huge cracks in all the doors.
They do that in Europe a lot.
Really?
When you see bathrooms, I mean, they're their own walled things. When you close it, it's only you in there. So
that would be a good fix. So moving on. So here's things not to say to transgenders. Now, I think that it's just confusing. I mean, like when you see somebody, how do you know whether to say he, she, or they? Are you going to offend somebody by calling them they? I mean, I feel like that's offensive, but here's this.
Are you a boy or a girl?
Is it he or she or they or what?
That's so in right now to be like #gender fluid.
Where do you shop, in the men's or the women's section? Or unisex? Unisex! That word needs to die!
The only confusion really is if you want to be referred to a certain way, but your exterior makes it mysterious. That's the only really scenario where it's confusing.
Yeah, because if I see a girl, I'm going to call her ma'am, and that used to be something that was, manners. That was good manners to call, yes ma'am, yes sir, like that's what parents taught, and it was a sign of respect. But now you can literally be fined by law. You can get in trouble for calling somebody the wrong pronoun. Here's a prime example.
We're not doing credit. You're going to give me money back.
Excuse me, sir. There's a young man in here.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
I can call the police if you'd like me to. You need to settle down.
You need to settle down and mind your business, okay? Ma'am, once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
I actually said both of you guys. It was general.
Right beforehand, you said sir.
Sir? Okay.
Take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you, sir.
I apologize. I apologize now.
I need your corporate number because I'm going to call them and talk about how it was misgendered several times in this store.
I apologize for that.
I need your corporate number now. Get it for me now.
I'm going to ask you to calm down and stop cussing.
Give me your corporate number. Well, I'm going to ask you for the 5th time to stop calling me a man, because quite clearly I am not.
And I apologize. I'm sorry for that, ma'am. I will get you that number. Is that okay?
Yes, get it for me now.
I'm asking you to stop
Get it
cussing.
for me now. I'm not cussing. I'm not cussing.
Okay.
Give me the damn number now, please. Ooh!
Ma'am, I apologize.
Ooh!
I apologize, ma'am. I will get you that number right now.
No, you're just going to keep your gums. You're just going to keep your gums and disrespecting trans people in this store, which I plan on telling the entire LGBTQ community. You're going to lose money over this.
So this person said, it's ma'am, clearly.
Yeah.
But a woman said, sir, could you stop cussing, because it wasn't clear to her.
Okay, in that clip I saw a lot of aggression, delusion, and denial. It's not clear. Clearly you're a man and not a woman, or else you wouldn't be making certain changes. You wouldn't be, wearing a handbag or whatever else it kind of looked like that person had breasts or something like that. Like, if it was so clear that you're a woman, you wouldn't have to be making all these changes to look more like a woman. So it may not be as clear as you think it is, and getting so aggressive at someone, you realize how calm the person working at the cash register was. I'm just trying to diffuse the situation. There was so much anger and aggression coming from this person. It's really sad to watch.
I think initially, my first impression, just when the video started playing, is I thought it was a woman from the back. I would have, but that was the back. When the turnaround happened,
Yeah, and what if you would have just been like, excuse me, ma'am, and he turns around, and then you're like, then you might feel like, well, did I say the wrong thing? But he would have took it as a compliment.
And I think there needs to be some freedom. If you correct somebody, you should correct them. I think that, hey, if somebody wants to be called whatever they want to be called, and they're asking for that respect, you know, what does it really matter to you? If the person's like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not a man, I'm a woman. Oh, okay, sorry, ma'am, you know, and then go on with it. But to destroy the poor store and, you know, to cause such a scene and like, that's okay, but yet the other person just simply called you the wrong pronoun, I see a big problem with that.
I think a little bit of grace, like you're saying, would be very helpful. And I think people largely will be accommodating. They may not agree with you. There's a lot of things in this world, you know, that we as individuals don't see eye to eye on. But if we allow people grace and we can be accommodating in certain situations, it you know, will help diffuse a lot of that anger. As Christians, you know, we're not just seeking to offend somebody at any and all time. So
it's interesting you say that. That was actually a big thing for me to view back at home. There was a debate going on in my church whether we should respect someone who's going through the transgender process and call them by the pronoun that they want to be called by or by their biological pronoun. If you meet someone and, you know, biologically they're a man, so you say sir and they said no, I'm a woman, some people would refuse to accommodate that person.
What would you do in that situation?
Oh, I would call them what they want to be called,
That's what I would do.
Or just stick to their name.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think if they're only going to be angry about it, there's no point in fostering that anger in someone.
Right.
Yeah, that witnessing opportunity is destroyed then, you know.
Yeah, I would use the name.
So here's a situation where, you know, we saw the bathroom situation, but now we have a trans girl, trans girl who wants to be in the boys' locker room.
The transgender student at the center of a controversy over changing in the boys' locker room is telling his story now to 10 News. Riel Creighton is live at Rancho Bernardo High School in Raleigh. He says he's surprised by all the reaction.
Right, Steve, he expected some complaints. He knew that when he entered the boys' locker room here at his high school that someone would say something, but what he didn't expect to hear was so much support.
There's a community here. We have like a huge community.
14-year-old freshman Jens Briscoe says he never wanted the attention.
I'm not trying to make a statement. I just want to be a boy and change and do the things that other boys do.
Born a girl, Jens says he's known since the second grade he was a boy and only this year made the decision to use the locker room associated with the gender he identified with.
A scary experience just coming out to somebody like this.
So now we're in the situation where we have a student who has every right to use the boys' locker room, even though the student has female anatomy.
Controversy erupting after this parent complained about the encounter her son had with Jens in the boys' locker room. Hundreds showing up, taking the issue before the Poway Unified School Board meeting Tuesday night.
I feel like I am being forced into an immoral situation.
A spokesperson for Poway Unified told 10 News the school is following California law, which says that individuals must be able to use the facility consistent with the gender he or she identifies with. Some parents are asking for separate bathrooms and locker rooms for students like Jens, who are transitioning.
It's not a good way to solve a problem, the problem that she's bringing up anyways, and that separation does not mean equal.
Meantime, he says the reaction he's getting from others is overwhelmingly positive.
And it's just astounding to see all these people who are on my side.
Now, the effort to challenge the law that allows transgender students to change in the facilities that they choose failed to get enough signatures to make it onto the ballot. Meantime, the school district here tells us that they are listening to parents' concerns and that they would consider a private changing facility for all students to use, but only if they want to. We're live at Rancho Bernardo High School tonight. Riel Creighton, 10 News.
See, I mean, they came up with a solution just like that as well. If there's really a big concern, rather than ousting those individuals, to offer something else that it's like, hey, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you can use that. I mean,
so they figured out this scenario, but what about, say, the coach who has to look over the locker room? In this scenario, a male coach in Florida, school punishes male teacher for refusing to watch a naked girl in the boys' locker room. I mean, this is a man who his job is to be a coach. That's what he wants to do. He's a male coach because he's a man. And now all of a sudden he's got an individual with female anatomy and he's being forced by his job to supervise this scenario.
I don't want to sound naive or ignorant. This is just like a question that popped in my head. I'd like to see the statistics, the facts. How many transgender people are there in the world versus how many just outright perverts there are in the world, and what we're opening up the door to for people to take advantage of this. Because I'm thinking on all angles, if you have even a bathroom that anyone could use, so you're not outing anyone. Okay, well that includes the person who's just an outright pervert who would go in and say, I know that both men and women are in there and it's no problem, so I'll just go in and start looking at people or whatever the case, And I've heard this debated, why it sounds kind of extreme, but whether it's extreme or not, it's something to consider when you're talking about people's lives.
I would agree. I think there's probably way more perverted people that would try to get into that situation than there is actually transgender. I mean, I think the transgender, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's not a very large population. So I would be more leery of that.
In this situation, you're not talking about a pervert. You're talking about a guy who has a job as a coach being forced to supervise a young female.
And I think it's really cool that this coach did not just comply with it and was actually saying, no, I don't need to be in the locker room, or I don't want to view this, and so I'm going to remove myself from the situation. He probably wasn't wanting to make a big deal about it, but then the school's now making a big deal about it, about him being there. And I don't know, that's kind of crazy.
So in the other clip, briefly said that the young person who was testifying felt like they were being forced into a moral issue. And here I see the same thing. So you're really, are you forcing both sides into what they believe is a moral issue? Now you have to come to terms with what is a moral issue, And, to force a man to watch a person who has female anatomy under other circumstances, if it's a minor, you would get in huge trouble for that, or it would even be considered child pornography. So really blurring a lot of lines with this, and we need to have much better definitions to deal with these kind of situations.
Now we see that 234 House Democrats, 2 Republicans co-sponsor a bill forcing schools to let male athletes compete on girls' sports teams. That's why I showed the comparison of the male body and the female body. Because now, let's face it, guys are gonna be better at sports than girls. If you're an athlete and you take steroids, you get kicked off the team. But you're talking about bringing somebody on the female team that has all this testosterone, here's what's going on. So this man identifies as a woman, and he wins first place, and the third place calls the whole thing not fair. 6'6", 220 pounds, that's not the body of a woman.
What sport is
this? Wait a minute, is this like basketball?
Is that the coach or is that the player?
That's the player.
Well, this one is a game changer. Delta College women facing a 6'8" opponent, and in her case, change is a big part of her game. It's a breakthrough on the basketball court. Had you been ready for the barrage of media that you've been getting?
No, I wasn't. It's kind of unexpected.
51-year-old Gabrielle Ludwig is a woman who up until July this year was a man. She joined the Mission College basketball team the first week of December.
I think that people who are either LGBT, they should be able to be themselves. Even though there might be a million people telling them no, don't do it. Follow your heart.
At 6'7", the move was embraced by her own teammates.
It was easy. We didn't really have to think about it. We didn't think about her being a transsexual. She's 6'7". Who doesn't want that?
This team has an advantage.
Yes.
Female athletes crushed by women who were once men. Transgender MMA fighter. The muscle mass is going to be way bigger than the female. So here's
now to a GMA exclusive. 2 transgender high school runners, they're kicking up dust in Connecticut, taking the top spots at the state girls championship. leaving parents wondering if they have an unfair advantage. Lindsay Davis is here, and you sat down with the track stars to talk all about this.
That's right, Michael. We're talking about a subject that's so sensitive that Andrea and Terry, who you're about to meet, felt when it was time to tell their parents that they're transgender, they each revealed it by text, and now they have gone public with it, and they're facing opposition from people who say even though you may feel like a girl, you need to compete against the boys.
Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood dominating the competition at the Girls Track and Field Championships in Connecticut earlier this month. Coming in first and second place, respectively.
So these two transgenders dominated first and second place. So it sounds like they have an advantage. So what if you said, well, all people in sports must play against what they were born with? Well, then here's the flip side. You got...
Sorry, but before you move on, just listen to the language.
What?
The two transgendered persons dominate the sport. Well, yeah, obviously, and it's only those two. And they're destroying all the other players
First and second place
who are
every
all
time.
biological women, and no one sees a problem with this?
Oh, they do, but they don't know what to do with it. That's where the confusion is, because if you say, okay, well, we got to make a rule against this, now you have to play against people with your born assigned gender. Here's a scenario. She was born a female. She's transitioning, but if he has been taking hormones or steroids, he should be wrestling boys. This transgender girl is wrestling on the female team, but she's been taking steroids. In any other situation, this would be against the rules. You'd be kicked off the team, but you can't say anything because it would be a hate crime to say you can't take steroids when you're transitioning. It's child abuse to say you can't do this.
Well, I suppose this is where it gets messy, because yeah, it would still be unfair for this trans man to wrestle against girls because he has an advantage. But for vice versa, I believe for the clip before, the two trans women had to be on steroids for at least 2 years, or I think that's the case, before they start competing with biological
It's a year,
women.
but they're taking female hormones.
Right.
Whereas here we have a girl on steroids, literally. A girl on steroids wrestling other girls. So it's like, no matter which way you go with this thing, it's going to be unfair. We can't really have equality when you're doing this.
I'd be curious to see if there was anybody trying to do it the other way around, and if not, why not? You know, are there any males? Well, I may need to make sure I get this right. They are born female but identify as male and then go to compete in male competitive sports. You know, is that happening? And if not, why not?
I think there's a reason.
Because you would lose
There's
every
a reason
time.
why there's, what is it called, the Special Olympics? Because if you put them to compete against able-bodied people, that would be unfair. But this is fair.
Well, and that's a valid point, because by the line of reasoning on I identify as, what prevents me from identifying as a disabled person and entering the Special Olympics, you know?
Where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw the line?
That's the whole question about all of this.
And who is drawing it?
Yeah, so here's a scenario, just listen to her story.
When I was a woman, men had a problem with me. When I was a trans guy, trans and queer people had a problem with me. Now that I'm detransitioned, Christians, men, and a lot of radical feminists all have a problem with me.
So this woman can't catch a break, but the show is called Transitioned. This transgender person had a change of heart, mind later in life and detransitioned, but now she's being hated by the trans community, I guess because you're not trans anymore, and she just feels like she totally doesn't fit in anywhere.
Okay, wait a minute. Isn't it a mental choice? I mean, at least it starts with a mental choice. I believe I am this way. So to say that I no longer believe I'm that way, why would you hate somebody? If you want the freedom to believe you're a certain way, why would you be upset if somebody says, well, I'm not that way anymore. I believe I'm something different. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. You can't have it both ways.
That this comes with.
Yeah, I think that's the end game of where this mindset will lead you is it's okay to believe you are anything. I mean, you are somebody who came from Mars. I mean, if you believe it, you should be it, except for if you have a realistic view back to the basics on where we started this whole thing from, then now you're insane and you're crazy, and that's a wrong mindset.
Their own ideology cannot coexist with itself. There's always going to come up a problem that makes it not equality. That's what they're wanting, equality, but it's not equal. So now, Boy Scouts organization inaugurates first all-girls troop. I think there's a word for that, isn't there?
Do they still call them Boy Scouts, or do they just call them Scouts now?
Oh, they're Girl Scouts. They're Boy Scouts, I mean, excuse me.
They are Girl
So
Scouts,
they're Girl
but they're
Scouts
Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
There's Girl Scouts, though, too, still.
It's the first all-girl Boy Scout.
Okay.
That's why I said there's a word for this.
Why not just call them Why not just call them Girl Scouts?
Oh,
Why not just call them Scouts?
Yeah.
Done. You're a scout.
That's
because we're trying
very
to push
confusing.
the boundaries of confusion, and this is the world that Satan is
All
setting
girls, troops, Boy Scouts.
I mean, just this doesn't. Okay.
Look where they're at.
What you teach a girl is not what you teach a boy.
Right.
Transitioned or not.
Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. Ontario, Canada, our neighbor to the north, has just passed a law giving the government power to take children away from their families if the parents do not accept the child's chosen gender identity. It basically makes it a form of child abuse. This follows a 2012 law that barred homeschooling families from teaching their children that homosexuality is a sin. Opponents fear these laws have wide-ranging effects on religious freedom. Here to discuss, our Executive Director of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, and Christopher Hale, and a Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church and a Fox News contributor, Dr. Robert Jeffress. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Dr. Jeffress, I want to get your reaction to this first. A lot of strong reaction on either side of this.
Yeah, look, this shows the hypocrisy of liberalism. You know, liberals are the ones who decry conservatives for not believing in science. And yet, when it comes to this issue of gender, it is the liberals who are denying science.
Preach it, brother. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, you see, we're supposed to have freedom, equality for all, but you're not allowed to teach your children homosexuality is a sin. You don't have that freedom. You're not allowed to tell your child, the parent child, is not allowed to tell the child that you should think about this, that what you're wanting to do here.
In other words, influence only goes one way.
But this is like getting at a core fundamental belief of what it means to be free. I believe that we live in a free country, a free society. You should be able to, hey look, if you want to believe that you are a whatever, trans person, whatever, I believe that you have that freedom to be able to do that, right? Yep. It's not something that I subscribe to, or not something that I would do, but hey, that's part of having a free society. You are able to believe that. If you want to be a Satanist, you should be a Satanist. You should have the freedom to be able to believe like that. I do not believe it's right for a Christian to force his views on someone else and all of a sudden make laws and say, listen, we believe that there's only two genders, and if you have a different idea of what a gender is, then I'm going to try you, flay you, put you in prison and all this kind of stuff, right? I do not believe that is right at all. You should be able to have that belief system.
That's exactly
what they're doing. I disagree with is where a trans person is going to now write a public law that says you cannot teach your child this viewpoint, and if you do, we're going to get you in trouble for it. That is a double standard, if I've ever seen a double standard, and that is not freedom. That is forceful totalitarianism.
That's right. That's right.
And I think it's a call to parents. They need to start having these conversations with kids. I mean, that's why we wanted to do this show in the first place. Like, we've got to start, helping those people that want to have a Christian upbringing and a view with, there's a clear line between what's right and what's wrong. We have to start having these conversations because this is what's coming down the pipeline. And pretty soon, you know, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and we know that.
We're starting to see the effects already. People like comparing millennials to all the other generations. You know, why are you guys waiting to get married so long or not having kids? Well, why do you think? Look at what we're dealing with nowadays, you know, compared to previous generations.
I mean, it's true. When I was a kid, this was not even a thought.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't even heard of. I'm sure there's probably some terrible things that have happened. I mean, all throughout life. You know, if you've ever seen the documentary, The Kinsley Report, just disturbing, huge disturbing, and that was somebody who was writing the sex laws back in the 1940s. So this is not a new topic, so to say, but the fact that it's coming out in this way is shocking to me.
Yeah.
So I was doing some research on sexuality in media, and maybe that should be another segment of LED Live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think we need to start covering more topics like this, because the generation that we're trying to reach, the youth, this is what they're having to deal with. So, I mean, these are real topics that need to be discussed, and most churches don't want to touch it. So.
Okay.
I can't wait to hear people's comments on this one.
Please give us your comments, share this video. We'd love to hear what you got to say, and keep coming back. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and keep coming back for more. God bless you guys.